net neutrality? Net neutrality is the communications principle that all network traffic must be treated equally no matter the source or destination. This means that no one internet service provider, or ISP, can discriminate how they allocate bandwidth to sites. Currently, how fast we can access internet content is only limited by the location, capacity, and performance of the content provider servers. This means that content providers can enhance their users' experience on their own. If ISPs were able to control which sites had priority access to bandwidth, which of course is a separate metric, then they could effectively influence what content is successful. An example of this would be if NBC Peacock released a docuseries about COVID at the same time that Netflix did. Comcast, who owns NBC Universal, could throttle the connection for Netflix while prioritizing traffic to NBC. This would eventually lead to people moving off of services like Netflix, since it would be seen as an inferior product. In e-commerce, Amazon or Walmart could pay to have their site load up instantly, while smaller or locally owned businesses couldn't afford to do that. In the absence of a neutral internet, only those that can pay the entry fee would benefit. Huge corporations and organizations could pay the extra cost to prioritize their traffic, therefore giving them a leg up. Our service providers like Comcast and Verizon would also greatly benefit, as they could now provide tier packages like these examples, which would further increase the cost of your internet. This would also affect those who use mobile data for their internet. This should be of massive concern to everyone, but especially to content providers. As a content provider, if your website isn't within these packages, you'll never be able to reach an audience. This will give even more business and influence to those that can afford to pay fees of entry. News media companies would also benefit. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox would all benefit because smaller news organizations could simply be throttled out of relevance. These giants could then control public, social, and political narratives. This allows the richest and most powerful among us to further manipulate the masses to satisfy their own agendas. As if preventing this wasn't a challenge already. Net neutrality is important since the internet is now a necessary utility, like water and electricity, and should be regulated as such. The internet has become a vital and necessary tool in our day-to-day life. COVID shutdowns have shown its importance. From students doing all their schooling online to people working remotely, we've learned just how critical of a role access to information and diversity of thought are to both our children's success and our own success in a global economy. Currently, we have a quasi-neutral internet, where no significant changes have been made due to legal gridlock. However, in February of 2015, the F.C.C. decided to reclassify broadband internet as a telecommunications service, which would subject it to Title II regulations under the Communication Act of 1934. This law was first established to regulate radio and wired communications, but have since been applied to the internet. Title I and Title II are the two classifications of communication carrier services that we use in the United States. Under the Title II classification, service providers are more strictly regulated and are held to standards similar to your telephone, gas, and electric providers. With the implementation of the 2015 Open Internet Order, ISPs are specifically prohibited from throttling, blocking, and paid prioritization. Unfortunately, former President Trump appointed Ajit Pai as F.C.C. chairman in 2017. Pai, who has long been an opponent of net neutrality, repealed the 2015 Open Internet Order in a 3-2 vote. According to the New York Times, Pai said, "We are helping consumers and promoting competition." He continues, "Broadband providers will have more incentive to build networks, especially to underserved areas." But building networks, especially in remote areas, is really expensive, and that cost would almost certainly be passed to the consumer, if in fact they were even built. Now that ISPs are classified as Title I services, the ban on throttling, blocking, and paid priority is lifted. They also don't have to disclose how they are managing their networks. But the FCC has added a transparency requirement, stating that if they are slowing down or speeding up specific data, they just have to explain why. I can't think of an easier loophole for them to exploit. Now that ISPs have been incorrectly classified, the FCC is greatly limited in its ability to protect consumers against internet service providers. To combat the federal undoing of net neutrality, California passed the California Internet Consumer Protection and Net Neutrality Act of 2018, which was immediately challenged by the Trump DOJ. California waited for over 2 years to enact this law, pending the ruling of Trump's lawsuit. In February 2021, President Biden withdrew this federal challenge. He also appointed F.C.C. veteran Jessica Rosenworcel to replace former chairman Ajit Pai. Rosenworcel applauded the administration's decision regarding the California law by stating, "Washington is listening to the American people who overwhelmingly support an open internet and is charting a course to once again make net neutrality the law of the land." And it's true, the overwhelming majority of Americans support net neutrality. According to a 2017 poll conducted by the University of Maryland, roughly 83% of Americans support net neutrality regulations. In addition to consumers, who else supports net neutrality? Likely anyone who has a website, for starters, but you might be surprised to know that most tech giants are also proponents, like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Facebook. There are also nonprofit organizations who fight for civil liberties, like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the ACLU, and the Mozilla Foundation, that all advocate for neutrality. In fact, the only significant opposition to net neutrality is the ISPs themselves. So Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, and of course Comcast. There's also Ajit Pai, who, not coincidentally, is a former lawyer for Verizon. What about the rest of the world? According to a CNN article from July 2018, India now has the world's strongest net neutrality rules. The only exceptions are telemedicine and autonomous driving platforms, which of course would get priority for public safety reasons. In stark contrast, there is absolutely no neutrality in China. The Chinese government has full control over all internet traffic. China also implemented the Great Firewall of China, which gives the Chinese government and service providers complete control as to what information can come in and be sent out over their internet. If you're interested in taking action to preserve net neutrality in the US, there are many things you can do. Join organizations like the EFF and stay informed about the current state of regulations. Or donate to the EFF and Mozilla Foundation. These two organizations are on the front line of ensuring that the internet stays neutral. Inform your local senators and representatives that the internet is no longer a luxury, but a utility, and as such should be reclassified under Title II. When the F.C.C. opens up comments prior to proceedings revolving around net neutrality, comment. If at all possible, support local ISPs if they're available in your area. Support municipal broadband initiatives. Municipal broadband would take power away from for-profit corporations like Comcast and give power back at the local level. As Roseville and Sacramento have public utilities, we are able to benefit greatly when stockholders and profits aren't the main driver. I'll list some resources below if you'd like to learn more. I hope that the concept of net neutrality is more clear to you now, and I especially hope you'll join me and the majority of Americans in fighting for an open and neutral internet. Thanks.